The humanity. Could F1 be more stupid? Rewrite the rules and expect F1 teams not to take advantage? Yeah, of course, mate. Yeah, of course. It's 2026. What else would you expect at this juncture? But for incompetence from the FIA, robust governance. Are you having a laugh? Of course, we speak about compression ratios. It was set to be 16-1. Last year, it was 18-1. Those engines were more efficient. Therefore, in the rules and the regs, which we've been screaming, imploring the FIA to rewrite because they read as if they've been written by a 5-year-old. They have not rewritten them apart from one stanza. The stanza that spoke about compression ratios, they added this phrase: at ambient temperatures. Mercedes and Red Bull read those and said, you know what, copy. So long as we pass the test at ambient temperatures in the pits, then we'll call copacetic. Nothing to see here. But when we go out on track, 18-1 settings. Oh, the humanity. This is chaos. And on the back of the Barcelona test, the teams are looking around at Mercedes and Red Bull Ford and doing one of these. What is this? A two-tiered formula. What are we doing? 2021, Max and Lewis down the road and the rest down here. And the guys and girls over at Audi, so to Aston Martin, Honda, are like, what are you talking about, FIA? We can't have this. Are we not looking to grow a sport at the altar of competitive racing? Well, there'll be none of that in 2026 if this compression ratio malarkey is allowed to endure. I'm telling you, chat, it's techie. Over the next 30 to 40 minutes, I'm going to talk to you to two separate articles, one by motorsport.it and one by the rate. I'm telling you, this is techier than techie things, but it is F1. What else would you expect? Chat, Mercedes is legal, that other teams need to catch up. So Crow, this is the problem, Crow. Supposing, again, going into the Barcelona test, the rumour was that that Mercedes advantage would be worth anywhere between 3 and 4 tenths. Now, the latest per these two articles is that on the back of the Barcelona testing, it's worth 2 tenths. 2 tenths. Supposing Mercedes have nailed themselves some aero. Mileage may vary, therefore, on this advantage, the extent of it. But to say it's not there would be disingenuous. Houston, we have ourselves a problem. If you were a betting degenerate, you'd be there are worse things that you could do than placing a wedge on George Russell and or Kimi Antonelli at this juncture. Here's what motorsport.it say, because these both of the articles that we're going to cite are focused on two different things. Motorsport cites Tom Biasis, who's the technical director, the head of all things technical over at the FIA. Listen, before we get into that, surely they must just employ somebody to rewrite the rules, for Pete's sake, and keep abreast of them. Pay somebody 6 figures just to monitor and make sure that there are no loopholes, because these teams, mention no names, Mercedes and Red Bull and Aston Martin, Honda, are going to nail it. Of course they'll take advantage. Tom Biasis, I don't even want to read out these statements because it feels like it's a day late and a dollar short. Preempt these things, for prevention is better than cure. Now we have ourselves a farce of a racing series in F1 as we head into the season opener. Here's what Tom Biasis has said, and I quote: "We absolutely don't want the championship to start and people to interpret the regulations slightly different. Write the rules in a way that doesn't allow for it then." Surely, am I being stupid? Are we trying to solve for Fermat's last theorem here? Or is this basics? I think more the latter than the former. Rewrite the rules properly. Make sure you get ahead of the game, right? Don't be lastminute.com firefighting as far as your robust governance or lack thereof. Tom Biasis continues: "I think it's fair to say that there are areas where the rules aren't clear to everyone." I wonder whose fault is that? Nicholas Tom Biasis? Am I being silly? Oh, what are we doing? Who wrote the rules, Tom Biasis? Gotta be the FIA. And if they didn't write the rules in a way that's true and fair and robust, then who else can we blame other than the FIA? I think this is ridiculous, chat. Unbelievable. Edgar, I think it's fair to say that there are areas where the rules aren't clear to everyone. Of course, he speaks to compression ratios. 18-1 is what Mercedes and Red Bull Ford will be running as versus the other 9 teams on the grid that are sitting out here compliant. 16-1, both Ambient and Track. The main goal, says Tom Biasis, is to ensure this issue is resolved definitively and absolutely before the first race. The best way you do that, Nicholas Tom Biasis, I think, is to write the rules properly in the first place. You know what I mean? Six Sigma settings. Are you aware of these principles? Get it right first time. F1 can't. Never can. Never has. Never will. Tom Biasis continues, we want to clarify all matters by following all existing governance processes, and then if anybody wants to complain, that's their business. No! Incorrect, Nicholas Tom Biasis. That's your business because you had that extra stanza added that spoke to the compression ratios, not in all circumstances, but a cheeky caveat exploited by Mercedes at ambient temperatures, and I quote, that's their business. Who is this chap anyway? Why is he talking like that? Their business. Is this not the FIA? Robust governance, transparency and sustainable at each and every single juncture. That's their business. No, Nicholas Tom Biasis. That's your business, sir, because you were the ones who dropped the ball. You were the ones, the FIA, the robust in inverted commas governance body of the $24.5 billion entity that is F1. It's your fault. Stop blaming other people. I can't even believe that we're here so early. It was always going to come. That train's never late as far as the FIA's incompetence, right? But so early, chat. What are we doing? Getting my head slowly back into the F1 space. You're a legend, Liam. And having a break since the end of Abu Dhabi. Red Bull silently going about the work. Be very rare. We'll get to it, Liam. I promise you today, though. I want to know. And Red Bull are one of the 2 teams who haven't piped up right. Everybody else is like, what are you doing, Nicholas? FIA? What, you want a 2-tier championship? Huh? What, you want to give away 2 to 3 tenths to Mercedes and Red Bull? Red Bull, of course, to a lesser extent. This is techie. Motorsport.it, though. Right, the data was collected as at Barcelona, and it showed that the advantage that Mercedes and Red Bull, of course, brackets to a lesser extent, the advantage that they're deriving at the altar of compression ratios, 18-1 on track, is anywhere up to 2 tenths over humanity. And this makes sense in retrospect. You heard Lando and Oscar talking about how good that the Mercedes looked. It's not just the power unit, it's the active aero, that they've been super efficient. Aerodynamic beast is what that Mercedes is. Everybody looking around at Mercedes trying to understand the extent to which they have the whip hand. Techie things. Here's what motorsport.it, right then. Focusing on solutions. What do? Do they add a sensor? What? Add a sensor so that you can detect what's going on out on track potentially, but even that will be difficult to police and institute for. Potentially do a self-certification thing. Some teams are saying potentially. Ask Mercedes to swear on the Bible. I do solemnly swear that the compression ratios whilst out on track are 16-1. What do you do? It's nonsense. It is farcical. Well, do you think Toto is going to say anything different to them being 16-1 and compliant whilst they're out on track? It beggars belief here, TWM. Words of qualitative nature, which leaves room for ambiguity from the jump compared to restrictive. TWM, take the bloody stanza out. Why? Who added in this phrase about at ambient temperatures for compression ratio measurement? Who? Surely they have to get sacked in the morning. And why? What for? Is that a Mercedes influenced decision? Is this fuel flow gate all over again? Like, what? His mates, they say, honestly, I didn't believe it was possible for me to be so outraged at this early stage of the 26th. We haven't even turned the wheel yet proper, circa 40 days away, FP1 Australia, and we're already in care. Self-certification, behave yourself. Add a sensor to the car. Well, that might be more feasible, but yet and still very difficult to police. But both, the ultimate. Listen, all you need to know, though, is to institute for any of the aforementioned, it will need to be unanimous. If one of the teams says, no, I don't fancy that, or more pertinently, two of the teams, mention their names, Mercedes and Red Bull, then you can't institute for it. And of course, Red Bull and Mercedes are going to go, no, you know what, I don't fancy this. Why don't we revisit this in 6 races' time, after which we've built up a lead sufficient that could be decisive in the World Drivers and Constructors Championships. What have we thought? Honestly, insane levels of incompetence by FIA. So early on, it's techie this. Unanimity amongst all teams, including Red Bull and Mercedes, who of course aren't going to self-sabotage. Why would they vote against themselves? No chance. No chance to go on. Here are the options per motorsport.it. Potential option, and again there will be 2 meetings, we'll discuss those in a minute. The potential options will be to work on the internal combustion engine to close the gap to Mercedes before the power check scheduled by the ADUO, whatever that means, additional development something, undertaking opportunities or something, for the 6th GP of the calendar. So this could get techie. George Russell could go into round 6 having leveraged 6 races, 5 or 6 races worth of 0.2 mileage may vary, and that 0.2 of advantage because of this compression ratio. I'm telling you, whoever rewrote those rules wants to have a word with themselves. 2026 written off already. This article continues. Perhaps the chasing pack should be allowed outside of the budget constraints to try and close this ice gap. I'm telling you, you beggars belief. It seems that Maranello isn't opposed to this possibility, but it's unlikely they'll get the green light. Why? Because all of the teams need to agree to it, and Mercedes and Red Bull, because it's their advantage, will not. Why would they? This article continues. One option would be to penalise the energy output of the Petronas fuel supplied to Mercedes. What? Is this like a handicap horse race? Are we give it? Well, why don't we just give them ballast, like more weight, balance of performance? Like what? Just call it WEC now. Like I just don't get it. Write the rules properly. FIA have been begging them to do this. I rewind, and again, if past this prologue, you recall when Max Verstappen came out the pits in Monaco, I want to say 3 years ago, and crossed the line, but a portion of his tyre was still touching the white line. At that point, the FIA did one of these. Well, we've rewritten the rules, but the rules haven't been rewritten. You've got to do a Grice's razor and understand the intention. What are you doing? If you rewriting the rules, then rewrite the rules properly, all of them. Why are we iterating? And it just makes those beggars belief. Genuinely, you can't believe that F1 is currently worth 24.5, or at least as our Friday close of play was worth 24.5 billion US dollars, and these bods are skimping on like rewriting the rules and bloody added in addendums and stanza that can be open to interpretation. It's as if they don't know about Brawn in 2009. Do you know what I mean? That these guys are going to read the rules once to see what they do say, and a second time to see what they don't say and how they can exploit them. Oh, we're going to only measure the compression ratios at ambient temperatures only. That's an important caveat that we need to... So stupid. You cannot believe this. So here we go. These are the potential options with a view to level the competitive landscape. Of course, one option, penalise the energy output of the Petronas fuel supplied by Mercedes. What? Yeah? In order to attempt to equalise performance. You couldn't write this. They just simply wouldn't believe you. Nobody can suspend their disbelief that much. This would involve a solution reminiscent of the one that severely impacted Ferrari in 2019, fuel flow gates, introducing a second FIA flow meter. Yeah, but they were cheating. It is different. While waiting for the International Federation to approve the possibility of modifying the power units through the ADUO Additional Development and Upgrade Opportunities Programme. But how would the theoretical advantage of Mercedes be measured without reliable data? Therein lies the issue. All of a sudden, we're just in regulatory nonsense. It's a mire. We're waiting, continues motorsport.it, to see what the FIA's final decision will be, considering the irreconcilable positions on an issue that threatens to divide the paddock before engines are even fired up for a race proper in the 2026 season. What are we doing here? A compromise, continues this article, surmises it. A compromise will likely have to be found, but it's unlikely to satisfy everybody. And therein lies the juxtaposition and contradiction in terms. If it doesn't satisfy everyone, if it's not unanimous, then you can't institute for it as a solve. This is I just don't understand. It's nonsense, and all very easily avoidable, by the way. If somebody at the FIA doesn't write into the rules at ambient temperature, this is just not, I'm telling you cannot write it, and the race gets techier than techie. I'm going to read out John Noble in a minute because he goes into further depth. 2 meetings, one on Monday, one on Thursday, with a view to fix for this fuel again. Ferrari had a problem like this in the past. No build block valves and pistons stronger. Fuel should be uniform. 100%. It is nonsense, king of nuts. You just can't be. Way to make me angry already. It is chaos. Easy, says Facts John. Physics Anthony. Let me tell you this, guy. We're going to have to read out this John Noble article because he's gone in as our guy Jonathan Noble. Here's what he says. Formula One manufacturers are set to have 2 key meetings with the FIA in the coming week, which should be decisive in bringing to a head the ongoing row over compression ratios. And the timing isn't lost on me. This isn't coincidental that this is just is transpiring not long after the bloody Barcelona private test. Again, F1 doing F1 things. The race, exclusively, says John Noble, can reveal that separate gatherings are to take place on 2 days, where it is hoped that progress can be made in resolving the differences of opinion that exist between teams. It has to be unanimous, though. You'll recall on this Monday, the FIA will hold its second meeting with technical experts to try and agree on a framework for future testing of compression ratios when engines are running hot. Then on Thursday, there is the next scheduled meeting of F1's Power Unit Advisory Committee, PUAC for short, where the controversy is set to be raised with a view to deciding on potential next steps. Oh, the humanity. 18-1 is ridiculous, mate. But what's even more ridiculous, John, lest I bury the lead, is that somebody rewrote the rules to allow this to be a thing. Do you know what I mean? Seeking consensus. So in the first instance, John Noble writes, amid the ongoing controversy surrounding a potential loophole in the new rules that Mercedes and to a lesser extent Red Bull may have exploited. The FIA is pushing hard to get a line drawn under the matter before the start of the 2026 season. So this is like, now it's all rush. Now we're fighting fires before we do something for once, FIA, that's not lastminute.com, and rewrite the flipping rules. Christian Horner settings. Why haven't they been rewritten? Forget like the bloody overtaking and defining the apex and what it means to defend and attack. Like, define those at the outset, right? Terms and conditions setting. Any litigator worth their metal would know this, but they don't want to throw any money at the solve, do they? They want to rake in their $100 million a year and not spend any on operating costs, not improving for the circumstance. The exact thing that Mohammed Ben Sulayem said that he would do per his mandate when he came in 22 is the exact thing that they haven't done, that they will not do, nor have they ever done. This is unacceptable. I'm telling you, I think Houston, we have ourselves a big problem. John Noble continues, while no change, I've read that already. While no change to the rules is expected in the short term, it is understood the avenue being pursued is to see if an agreement can be reached with all competitors about a method to measure the compression ratios when engines are running hot. So we get into sensors again, don't we? I just feel like this is the little boy putting his thumb in the dike. Solve for these things at root cause, right? Don't make the bloody mistakes in the first place. Prevention is better than, equal to, or more than cure. At the moment, the checks, continues Noble, to ensure compliance with the 16-1 limit laid down in the rules are taken in ambient conditions per this additional stanza, this extra clause that somebody wrote in the rules and regs sporting code of conduct. For it just, mate, honestly, I don't want to go scorched earth. B29, you're a legend. There are so many loopholes in the new regs. There are literal holes like the hole in the diffuser because they removed the limitation of constant surface. Very well said, B29. It just makes no sense. All over the show. I just think they need a proper litigator like a KC or somebody to comb through them and make sure. Imagine you sat down with Ross Brawn. You'd be able to tell, and an Adrian Newey, like a proper god tier F1 mind. You need a poacher turned gamekeeper, Charlie Whiting settings to comb through the rules and the regs. But you know what the joke is? I don't think that's this. I would argue that normally if you've got a double diffuser, that will need some like a professional, like a keen, eager mind, like a discerning eye of an F1 aero or engineer to eke that out. But if you're just going to put blatantly at ambient temperatures, like, well, it's a red flag, right? Come and exploit this loophole. Toto, James Allison, Lauren Meckies, like, why don't you come and exploit? It's a massive red flag. Insane. At the moment, the checks to ensure compliance with the 16:1 compression ratios limit laid down in the rules is taken at ambient conditions. The theory is that Mercedes and Red Bull, have found a way to exploit these and run at higher level when the power unit is hurt. A recent gathering, here, this is news. A recent gathering, says Noble, of technical experts within the FIA made some progress on this front, with some outline principles being agreed. However, not all elements as far as the new measuring method were supported by everyone. Of course they were not. No kidding, Sherlock. It needs to be unanimous, and you think you're going to get those who have that advantage and the whip hand at the altar of compression ratio tax avoidance. You think Red Bull and Mercedes are going to agree to this? They're going to sabotage, cut off their balls? I don't think so. No chance. Not all elements of the measuring method were supported by everyone, with sources suggesting that only 4 competitors were well aligned. I wonder who those were. Mention no names. Ferrari, Audi, Honda. You know what I mean? Of course it's going to be those who are disadvantaged. It is known, however, that Ferrari, Audi and Honda have been in discussion over the matter and wrote a joint letter to the FIA before Christmas seeking clarification. You dropped the ball, chaps. You know what I mean? There was something that you should have exploited and you haven't. Then hold some corn. Then, but again, this is the problem, right? F1 in 2026. Liam Parker said it's not sport. It's content. And that's why they need to take so seriously and prioritise so urgently a levelling of the competitive playing field. It's techie, that though. If we double click on that for a second, you guys let me know in the chat what you think. Let me know in the comments. Do you think they should level the competitive landscape and the playing field so early on before race 6 of a 24 race season? What are we doing here? We're playing tiddlywinks. Is it reminds me of my son's school where everybody gets a medal just for participating? Is this snowflake F1? You imagine Prost and Senna and Jim Clark and like Sir Frank Williams looking at this. They'd be like, how far have we fallen as a sporting endeavour? But again, we're not sport, remember. Liam Parker says that F1 is content. Sources, say Jonathan Noble, have indicated that following the first meeting, the FIA wanted more data to be obtained in testing regarding compression ratio checks so it can make progress in trying to finalise a procedure that can be supported by everyone. Now they've got it on the back of Barcelona, and that's where it gets techie. That's why they were so god tier. That's why Mercedes were fresh out the back 200 kilometres as if it were nothing. You know what I mean? Reliable and fast, which is more concerning. No longer is it the W13, the performance curve of which was infinitely high, but also infinitely impossible to access. This is a different car, a different beast, and that's why the other 10 teams are running away from this circumstance, keen to amend for it as soon as possible. The outcome of those tests, writes Noble, is understood to be key to the calling of a fresh technical workshop on Monday to see if an agreement can be reached among the manufacturers about a specific direction in the future. They're front loading it now, chat, because they know They have the evidence firsthand. Everybody saw, even Stevie Wonder could see that Mercedes will be dominant, properly dominant, if left untethered, untrammeled by intervening FIA. It is hoped that a positive outcome from the workshop on Monday could then be taken to the PUAC for more formal discussions, writes Noble, about whether it is implemented. It is, though, a work in progress. Speaking to Ferrari's technical director, Enrico Galtieri, he said that he felt discussions with the FIA had been positive so far, but that work was still needed. We are checking with the FIA, said Galtieri. We are discussing with them. We had a meeting, a technical workshop, and we are going to have an additional one in the next days up to the PUAC meeting on Thursday. We are approaching the topic together. Oh, how did we get here, chat? What are we doing? Proper chaos, no socialising, and the stupidity in F1. 100% Edgar. We don't want to do that. It is understood that a potential implementation of a new testing procedure has not been up for discussion with the technical experts and is something that will only be discussed at PUAC level on Thursday potentially. However, it is obvious, Rounds concludes Jonathan Noble, it is obvious that any change to the rules would not get support from the Mercedes and Red Bull teams if there was a risk of it hurting their competitive. No kidding, Sherlock. Why would they? Fair play to them for being genius enough to take advantage of the incompetence of the FIA. Why should they need to sacrifice that? What, for our own viewing pleasure? Because F1 is content. No, that's not how this works. You know what I mean? Stupidity needs to be penalised. Ingenuity and innovation needs to be rewarded now. For this is the weird and wacky sport that is F1. Noble concludes, it remains to be seen whether Mercedes and Red Bull would agree, but he doesn't think they will. That they are doing all that it will take to keep matters in their own hands at the start of the season as far as their advantage, potentially lodge a formal protest to seek clarification over the legality of the situation. Change the rules because you're losing. That's my ball. I'm going home with it. That's what it feels like the weaker teams are doing. I think this is chaos. This is proper chaos. Oh, and by the way, to add insult to F1 injury, you need to know that these guys, during testing, they weren't even using the proper fuel. Some teams are losing last year's fuel. Oh my God. Houston, we have a problem. That's why they had to private test it, right? Close the doors. So scared were they of having reliability issues all over the shop. 22 cars parked out on track potentially. That's how scared they were. I'm telling you. Can you say F1 snowflakery? Because I can. We're not changing the compression. Rosberg, they won't. That's exactly what Red Bull will say, right? Everyone hit that like, you're a legend, Cheaper. I appreciate it. What are we doing here? Bloody Nora T-Racer. 100,000% Rosberg. Oh, the humanity. For real, for real. Houston, we have ourselves a problem. So whilst it looked hunky-dory at Barcelona, nothing to see here. Everybody's crossed their technical T's and dotted their aerodynamic I's. It feels like there were things that they weren't telling us. Reliability wasn't a massive issue because all of the teams did, and Nero's makes no difference. A gazillion laps, Mercedes smashed out 400. But again, some of those teams weren't using the proper fuel, sustainable fuel, the fuel that they're going to use for the entire of the 2026 season. And that means that it's going to be chaos. We have ourselves a two-headed beast of a problem for which 11 teams will need to slay. In the first instance, sort out the bloody fuel, because this sustainable fuel will be unstable, difficult to read, temperamental. Again, it's design synchronicity, is it not? But that's exactly what they haven't been testing. And in the second instance, John, where is the drama? In the second instance, 9 of the 11 teams on the grid have to solve for the problem of compression ratios, and that anywhere up to 0.3 that it yields in terms of advantage for Red Bull, Ford and Mercedes. Meeting on Monday in the first instance to discuss the principles around which they might test this self-certification potentially from Mercedes, maybe instituting for a cheeky sensor. And then on Thursday, PUAC, again, more conversations had. They need to sort this out because it could become problematic. But what burns me more than ever is that the FIA don't understand one of the most fundamental things, not just of F1, of life, that prevention is better than cure.